And whenever you see a giant player count like that, it usually indicates that it's a roll and write with simultaneous play, and this is the case. Because this one looks like a really interesting roll and write where each player is going to have their own pad of paper. And the game plays over 12 rounds, but each round you're going to be rolling a pool of dice. And there's going to be dice of a few different colors, with each of the colors being associated with a certain quadrant on the action track. Each of the quadrants are also broken down into smaller segments, with each of those segments being associated with a different value of the die, and of course offering you different actions to choose from. But what most of these actions are going to do is grant you resources that you'll then be able to cross out on your own personal player sheet. There's a bunch of different resources you can gain. There's the pickaxe that allows you to fill in different cells within the mine section, which will grant you victory points for filling in different rows and columns. And of course, there are certain areas that will grant you other resources. So there is a cascading effect that can happen, because when you fill that in, you'll be able to gain access to that other resource, which can allow you to fill in more cells on the sheet. And this concept does exist in other areas you'll be filling in as well. The wood resource allows you to expand your town, but then also to build buildings around the perimeter of your board. And the nice thing about building these is that building production is going to be triggered on certain rounds throughout the game, which means that the more buildings you have built earlier, the more benefit you'll get from them over the entirety of the game. But there is one more thing you have to do in order to build your buildings, and that's to unlock those building locations. And in order to do this, you'll be using the roads resource, which will allow you to fill in different paths along the road, reaching these different flags which represent the building locations. But then you'll also be gaining any bonuses from icons that you're able to reach, as well as bonuses for surrounding complete sections of the land. And the last resource we have is an interesting one, because this one is actually the villager resource. And this one can be used in one of two ways. It can either be used as a worker or as a knight. If you're going to be using it as a worker, you're going to be filling in one of these villager spaces. At the end of the round, you're going to be moving up this track equal to the number of the workers that you have filled in that row. But the nice thing about this is that those workers go to work every single round. So if you fill in all three of those, you're going to be moving up 3 points on that track every single round. And you can probably see that you'll probably end up maxing out that track pretty quickly if you do get 3 workers there. But if that's the case, you're actually going to be earning gold for each space that you can't move up that track, which is going to earn you victory points at the end of the game. One thing to note here is that each of these rows are also associated with a different color die, and they're only going to be activated when that associated die is chosen for that round. So even if you fill up one of your rows with 3 different workers, if you don't choose that die, that track is not going to move up. But now let's get over to how the knights work, which are going to be protecting you from attacks throughout the game, which if they go unprotected will give you negative victory points at the end of the game, because anytime that a 1 is rolled on any of the 4 die, it's going to be causing an attack to all of the players, and to indicate that, you're going to be filling in the sword icon at the top of the board. But if you spend one of your villagers as a knight, you'll be able to fill in the next knight on that bottom row, and anytime that your knights are ahead of the swords, that means that you're completely defending against all of the existing attacks. But the game essentially continues like this, with players rolling their dice and then using those dice to perform various actions out on their sheets. And like I said, there'll be a ton of cascading effects, and there will also be some objective cards that players will be trying to complete throughout the game as well, which will kind of change your strategy from game to game. And those do grant you additional victory points if you are able to complete them. So if this one does sound interesting to you, you can definitely check it out. I have it linked in the description below. And of course, you can click to get notified.